This is going to be a little different. It's going to be a personal story of mine that I wanted to share with you over the next 30 minutes or so. As Kendra mentioned, I'm a consulting engineer, and I've always been a consulting engineer, but before that, when I was a kid, I just loved art. I enjoyed pencil sketching, watercolor, acrylics. Never did very well with sculpting, so that wasn't part of my interest. But I've always enjoyed art and trying to find ways throughout my life to incorporate art in other things that I'm doing. So in this particular case, 30 years ago now, I tried to find a way to blend my interest in photography with my vocation in engineering. Back in 1990, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System was established, NPDES, Kendra mentioned that. I was a young engineer at the time, and I was working on stormwater pollution prevention plans for industrial clients and was doing my part to make this a better world. And I still remember after work one rainy night, I got onto the bus, I looked down in between the curb and the bus step, and this gasoline-laden oil was in the stormwater coursing its way to the storm drain inlet. And I got to thinking, scientists and engineers can do everything possible to try to solve the problem, but what's really needed is to educate the public about the magnitude of the stormwater pollution problem and provide guidance and information to them as to how they can reduce this problem. So anyway, that's kind of the gist of my story, and let's launch into it. First of all, you're probably wondering when you got the program via email from NEBC, what's this crazy photograph for this speaker, abstract bio picture? Well, hopefully with my brief intro just now, you kind of understand the reasoning for that. And it's similar to my main objective with my work is to use photography to attract and educate. And then when people realize what the photos are all about, let them understand more about the stormwater pollution problem. For those of you who are still uneasy with that abstract image, there, we've got my mugshot right there covering up the silhouette. As Kendra mentioned, I am an associate at Environmental Science Associates, and I'm an actively pursuing business development, project management, marketing, and that's my vocation. Again, my avocation is photography and trying to find ways to blend that together. Anyway, here's a quick agenda. I've kind of done this, but in the next slide, I'll give another elevator pitch to you all. And then I wanted to delve into some background over the past 30 years. And then we're going to have a virtual gallery show. As you eat your lunch, you can pretend that you're walking through an art gallery. I'll show some of the abstract images. And then wanted to share some of the other environmental education efforts I've tried over the years. And then kind of wrap up, I'll put my engineering hat on and we'll delve into some oil drip questions and calculations. So this sounds exciting. Let's just jump in here. So again, the elevator pitch is this photography series, Pollution and Abstract, series of photographs of stormwater pollution. My intent is to attract people to the abstract nature of the images, have them say, what the heck is that? What are these photos all about? And then once they realize that, hopefully there's a mindset change and an understanding about how prevalent stormwater pollution is, and then educate them about what they could do to prevent the pollution. So in my ventures in roads and parking lots, and through a highly scientific survey process, I've realized that most people see these drips and drops in the streets. Everybody can see them. Not so many people understand that they go to the nearest drain inlet and leave, are washed off and go into the outfalls. Not too many people at all know where the water goes. And hardly anybody, really, to this day, understands the human health effects of stormwater pollution. So what motivates me for doing this all these years? Well, it's personal. I have a family history of cancer. My sister passed away from leukemia when she was age 6. Mom and Dad, they had cancer at the same time back in the late 90s, early 2000s. When I've talked to folks in a live audience, I've asked, how many of you can share this experience that you also have a family history of cancer, and it's kind of incredible how many hands go up. So this touches a lot of people. And back to the human health aspects of stormwater pollution, if we can resolve the pollution problem, it can only help with human health impacts from water pollution. So what I'd like to do here is I've included a couple of video clips, which will kind of be a further introduction and overview of my work. Most recently, back in 2017, Oregon Field Guide did a really nice video clip, so we'll show that. And then we're going to go back 26 years. The Portland Evening News did a really quick clip about me when I had one of my first gallery shows in Portland. And I wanted to say that the photos on the right there, my oldest daughter took those, and she's become quite a photographer in her own right. Okay, so we'll shift over to the video clips, and I'll join you back in a little bit. This is a problem that's fascinating in a way. It's so obvious because it occurs at your feet. You can look down in any city on a rainy day and see this pollution happening, but most people just don't connect with that. So it looks like there's no traffic. There needs to be a certain combination of events. Overcast day, light drizzle, usually carry an orange road cone. I almost got backed over by a car, so I've been carrying a road cone just to play it safe. Ooh, that's nice. It's fascinating when you can find some images that are really abstract and really interesting. That's the fun of it. In college, I pursued degrees in civil engineering and landscape architecture. That kind of led me into water resource engineering. That's been my career, my whole career. But I've always had this interest in art. I was working on stormwater pollution prevention plan, and after work I stepped onto the bus. It was a rainy day, and I looked down between the curb and the bus and saw all this oily water going down the gutter. And that got me thinking about combining this interest in art and engineering. Yeah, this is pretty good, even with the full sunlight. In terms of the field of oil slick photography, I think I was a pioneer 20 years ago when I started. This almost looks like gold. Let's try to find some blues here. There we go. Looks like a fresco almost. I'm not doing this all the time. It's an avocation. It's my personal interest. There's a lot of newer cars out there, and maybe the pollution's been dwindling, but even so, you can go out any rainy day, and maybe you have to search a little bit, but you could still find cars that are dripping. If you start to think about it, they really can add up. This is one vehicle dripping multiple times a minute all over the place. So this is a really good track. I haven't seen one of these in quite a while. In the U.S., every year, these drips and drops add up to about 3 Gulf oil spills. And I think the Gulf oil spill was 210 million gallons, something like that. It's a huge number, but it's so spread out, so dilute. You know, it's not as newsworthy or dramatic as a Gulf oil spill, but it's happening all over wherever vehicles travel. Unfortunately, there's a lot of subject material. I wish there wasn't, but you know, my thought was to take a different approach, make the pollution attractive to attract people, and then have them understand in that kind of a way. Get my feet in it. There we go. It's kind of interesting to try to make pollution as art, but it's one way to approach this problem. So, yeah, we'll see.
By capturing our waste in pictures. Paul Gallen has seen them.
People walk by Kevin Coulton's pictures and admire the beauty, and then recoil when they look closer and notice they are looking at pictures of pollution.
Good, that's what I want.
He is an engineer by trade, photography just a hobby. Last November, he looked down one misty day and was shocked at what he found. Coulton decided then and there that he needed to let us know what we're doing to our world. Beautiful pictures, just a way to pull us in.
If they know that they're approaching something that's dealing with pollution, they have the early benefit of maybe veering away and not dealing with it. As you can see, there's quite a bit of oil there. It's kind of like a microscopic Exxon Valdez that's going on there. There's a lot of oil collected. Make it beautiful, make it attractive, and hopefully the gallery goers will come down and see some interesting compositions, walk over, and then I'll try to hit them over the head with the fact that the images are of pollution, and it's something that they and everybody in urban areas is contributing to. So that's the reaction I want. I want to try to attract and then educate so that when people leave, they're more aware about this form of pollution.
His pictures are on display right now at the Photographic Image Gallery. He says until now he just told friends about his concerns. The exhibit, he hopes, will catch the eyes and ears of a much bigger audience. In downtown Portland, Paul Gallen, Newsroom 6.
My, how things have changed in 30 years, hairline and other things. But hope you enjoyed those clips. It does provide a nice bookends, if you will, for what I've been doing over the last couple of decades. Anyway, back to the news way back in the 90s. I was listening to the weather folks talking about how we should be careful on the streets because it was the first rain of the season and the roads were real slippery. And I was sitting on the couch waiting for them to say, tell us why the roads were slippery. And it's because of the buildup of oil and grease and other pollutants that vehicles have dripped during the dry weather. Anyway, that got me thinking, I need to start writing as well as taking photographs. So I have a series or several op-eds in the Oregonian, and I think they'll be available as handouts. But this one from the early 90s picks up on that story about the newscasters not giving the whole story about why the roads were slippery. Also wrote an Oregonian op-ed about We Are Water, which ties in the health aspects of stormwater pollution. And through professional societies also have had some papers published related to the public outreach aspects of this type of work. Anyway, you don't have to read all these exhibits, but I thought I'd just bullet out some of the opportunities I've had over the years to primarily exhibit my photos or talk at conferences like this. Most recently in 2017, 2016, I had a lull in the action, if you will, so I decided to submit to several exhibits and was pretty successful in getting the pollution photos entered for photography exhibits. But these go back into the 90s, mostly around the Portland and Seattle area. There were some opportunities, you can see in the lower right there, back in Washington, D.C. But it's been great to have opportunities like this to reach out to people beyond the folks like all of us at this conference who may be more aware of the pollution problem. So I've enjoyed all aspects of environmental photography, from hopping on a plane and taking aerial photographs of land use and land development to more documentary-style images of agricultural pollution, as in that middle photo. But this close-up aspect of getting really close to stormwater pollution has been something of interest. That lower image shows a cameraman from the early 1990s taking some shots for the news, and he got into it. And the Oregon field guide photographer got into it too when he started to really look at the pollution occurring at his feet. So anyway, with the next few slides here, I'll slowly click through them. This is the gallery show part, and I may chime in. You know the saying, a picture says 1,000 words, so I might provide some context for them. But these are the abstracts in the Pollution and Abstract series, just a handful. I've got a lot of them. Anyway, we'll just shift through these over the next minute or so. This was in the Gresham public library parking lot at sunset. I was getting into my car and looked down and saw the low-angled sunlight hitting these drops and got the tripod set up just in time. This was in a Winco parking lot. Early Sunday morning. I try to head out when there aren't too many cars around because I have almost gotten backed over by cars. But you could see the parking lights in the oil drips. And then what I noticed years ago when I started with this is that I thought I was all by myself taking these photos, and I noticed movement when I was trying to compose the image. And it was my silhouette in every drop. So what I try to do on a lot of these photos is I always use a tripod, but I use a self-timer, and then right before the shutter's tripped, I try to get my hands out so that the fingers are discernible, and it creates these silhouettes in every drop that can sometimes be eerie. Quite often I'll incorporate a natural object like a leaf or a pine needle, and in a way that provides some context to the image with regards to the magnification, but also the contrast between human and natural worlds here, pollution and natural worlds. Well, I hope you enjoyed that gallery exhibit. One other thing I've been doing in more recent years is I'm trying to, for the frame photography or frame photographs that I exhibit in galleries, I've tried to use the mat board to set the context for the image. So that led me to this idea of imprinting tire tracks and dripping diluted gray watercolor on the mat board to simulate oil drips. I used to literally drive over the mat boards, drive around the neighborhood, get some grime on the tires and back over them, but I think the neighbors were talking, so I've shifted to doing this in the garage, and I got an old tire from Les Schwab, and I put diluted gray watercolor on the paint, or on the tire, and spread that across. So that results in a frame photograph like this, which, again, I've exhibited in several galleries. What I'd really like to do is have an exhibit with the photographs on the ground so that the people who come to see the images truly see the context that these are photographs that were taken right at your feet. Also doing some experimenting with the abstracts by making abstracts of the abstracts. And it's kind of interesting some of the colors that can result from that effort. I've done a lot of things. Not too many have been successful, I'll be honest. That's in thinking about this, I literally pulled open a drawer on my file cabinet, and those are all things that I've tried over the years. Some successful, most not. But I'll touch on a few of these. But back before email, I was trying to encourage the Postal Service to create a stamp for education, advertising, billboard, coffee table, books, and I have published note cards, and those have been really good. I still have a bunch of them in my house, but blank on the inside, color images of the pollution on the front, and on the back, a message about stormwater pollution and prevention. So anyway, here's an example of a proposal I ran by EPA back in the 90s also, where the thought was to use billboard advertising, common forms of media where the people look anyway, but use it for environmental education purposes. Here's that stamp proposal, and I got feedback from Mark Hatfield at the time, and again, things just didn't work out, but at least I caught some interest from a congressman. Also, Al Gore was in Portland back in the 90s, and I tried to get some note cards to him. I forget what hotel he was staying at, but I got the cards to one of the security guys, and lo and behold, he gave them to Vice President Gore, got a nice letter back from him. We just celebrated Earth Day. I had corresponded with Dennis Hayes back in the 90s. He's the co-founder of Earth Day. I was pitching a TV show to him and several others with the thought that, again, TV shows are a great way that people learn and watch things in their leisure time, but there could be ways to use that for education. Okay, now we're going to shift to more of the technical part of this program, and this gets into the oil drip questions and calculations. So, as I was taking the photographs, I started thinking, well, where do you find these drips? Because I wanted to get more photographs. How much oil is in a drip? How many vehicles drip? And how much oil is dripped in a year in the United States? So let's look at some of these thoughts here. To prep for that Oregon Field Guide episode, I sent the journalists and cameramen some ideas as to where we could go. And frankly, you can go anywhere. There's drips everywhere. But it's kind of fun if you go on Google Earth, you can see the drip and oil stains in each and every parking stall. They tend to be more concentrated closer to the entrance of a store, and the farther away you go in the parking lot, less oil drips. Also, when you see these oil stains on a highway, I'll bet you $1,000 that there's probably a bump in the road right next to that oil drip where the car goes up and then down and the gravity forces out oil stain or more oil onto the roadway. Even in the cartoon world, they have this problem. I don't know if you've noticed in Homer Simpson's driveway, there's an oil stain. So somebody has to talk to Homer also. So anyway, just putting on a detective hat, it's kind of interesting where you can see oil drops and drips. This caught my attention, kind of ironic, where there's fleet vehicles, garbage trucks that are picking up waste, but unfortunately they seem to be leaving waste as they go on their merry way. Some of these drips are huge, and it makes you wonder how much oil or gasoline is coming out of these vehicles as they park and as people park and go shopping. Again, how much oil is being dripped here along this road? The frequency of the drops, you can see sometimes very closely spaced drops, and I did some estimates here, assuming the velocity of the car and the spacing of the drips, and perhaps as this car was slowing down for the stop sign, maybe the car, while it's just sitting there, would be dripping about 3 drips a second. So this gets really into the detailed part of the presentation, but and don't tell anybody what I did. I went to the dealer where I have leased my car, went to the shop, and I asked them if I could have some used motor oil. And they gave me some, and I got an eyedropper, and then I went to a abandoned parking lot, and nobody was around, and took one drip of the used motor oil, dropped it on the pavement, and took a photograph of it. And looking up on the internet, what's the volume of a drip? In some cases, it's 0.05 cubic centimeters. So I had the photo of the drip. Oh, I put a ruler in the photo also for scale reference. So anyway, then I went home, pulled out my old college physics book, flipped to the optics chapter, light, and realized that the colors reflect the thickness of the oil. So you don't have to look at all that, but that's the little spreadsheet I put together, and I estimated the area of the rings of the different colors, and the different colors indicated the depths of the thickness of the oil, and then combined all that together, and lo and behold, I ended up with looks like 0.0533 cubic centimeters. So that was pretty close. I felt pretty good about that. So then when you start to patch this all together, and I'll let you read the table there, so we've got the volume of an oil drip, and let's just say a car drips 1 drip a minute. But as you can see in the inset photo to the right, that could be a pretty poor estimate. Cars may be dripping a lot more. And then I looked at the number of registered vehicles in the US. I know I got to update that. It looks like 2012, so there could be some edits to this. And then in the literature, actually there was a study in Vancouver and a study up in Puget Sound that found through random sampling of vehicles that 40% of those samples dripped oil. So if you do all the multiplication there, you get that volume of oil dripped in a year, convert from cubic meters to US gallons, and then I compared it to the volume of the Gulf oil spill. And for those of you a little older, also the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And that's where I get, well, maybe in the US every year, there's a little bit more than 3 Gulf oil spills worth of oil and gas and stuff and goop dripped in the US every year. So I wanted to check my math, and again, went back on the internet, did some searching. There's not a lot of information available, but I know this is a busy slide, but if you just start from the top, this is a National Academy's Press book on oil in the sea, and they talk about all the different sources of water pollution from oil, petroleum products. Anyway, they've estimated that land-based from rivers and runoff, 1,900,000 tons per year. And down at the bottom, I did the conversions and ended up with, 569 million gallons per year. And I had estimated 710 million gallons per year. So, you know, I'm 25% high, but it's in the ballpark. And who knows for real life, but it provides some indication that there's a lot of oil and gasoline and other pollutants dripped from vehicles throughout the nation and the world. So I'll stick with it. I think there's at least 710 million gallons of oil and gasoline and other pollutants dripped from motor vehicles in the US each year. And that's a little more than 3 Gulf oil spills worth of oil that's dripped throughout the US. So circling back to health, we all know this, that water is the element of life. Our bodies are 65 to 80% water by weight. So the water within us comes from the water around us. So our health is directly related to the quality of the water in our environment. We are water. So the prevention of stormwater pollution now becomes everybody's concern. So I wanted to wrap up. I wanted to share with you that I have a few other photo series on my website. These are a little more humorous and lighter in nature. But I got to thinking that second photo from the left, that's a photograph from my series, More Puns Intended, and it's got a stormwater theme. Bear me out here. So again, if we were live, I'd ask for hands for anybody who can tell me what the visual aspects of this photo are depicting, what cliche is being depicted here. Since I can't see any hands, I'll just tell you it's the cliche, thanks for braving the elements. I got my young daughter with an umbrella to walk around, and then later on I photoshopped in periodic table element symbols. So anyway, somewhat of a stormwater connection there, but feel free to visit the website to see more about what I've been doing on my evenings and weekends. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and we can't do a Q&A, but if you do have questions or comments, please reach out to me through my email, kevincoulton@gmail.com, and would love to talk to you. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of the conference.